for me, I didn't get a choice of what I got to show and tell. There was an article about my family in the newspaper because we were one of the first few families to come as refugees to Connecticut. And I remember being told, "Oh, that's great. It's your family. Do let's go and talk to the different classrooms about whatever this article." I mean, I couldn't even read. Yeah,
Hello, welcome to another episode of Cosmic Chats. Today we have a fabulous guest, Truc Nguyen, who was a mental health counselor for high school students, decided to change that and move more into the comedy field. We'd like to remind you to like and subscribe. Here is the ebook, Vedic Meditation Stories. It's free if you have Amazon Unlimited Kindle, but we're going to get deep into finding out what it was really like when she came over here from Vietnam as a child, and how in that school system there was not much choice of her being identified simply by the color of her skin. How would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never eaten one?
I don't think I'm a good example for a referral of what a banana tastes like because I have negative associations with it. Because I think about taste is not just the flavor of something, it's also the texture, like how it feels in your mouth or, just even going down to your digestive system. And I mean, bananas, it's like I want it to be this sweet thing. I want to describe it to someone. It's like, oh, it's a very sweet, pungent type of fruit, but then it gets jacked when we bring in the texture of it.
So
Because yeah, and when I was
it just jacks you up. Do you
it
ever get
jacks you
tricked,
up. It jacks you up.
tricked by the banana? You think, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
this
This
time.
is yeah, exactly. And for me though, I was like drugged with banana mush when I was a kid because I used to be really sick, and kid medicine that time, with the horse pills, whatever, it would just be grounded up pills and banana mush. And it would just cling to my throat. So it would be like this bitter, sweet, viscous. It's like being like eating, I don't know, alien slime is, is what I would describe it.
So
Yeah,
you
it
said
is sweet and pungent.
you were sick as a child a lot. Would you say that's when you had your first existential life crisis?
I mean, I started out young. I mean, what is existential when you're 3, when you're
Well,
5?
looking back now, so like you look back now with your consciousness of who you are, and there are markers in our life that we become more aware of as we dig deep and go into work, right, on about ourselves. But we have certain moments that are very telling, maybe our first memory or an event that we shift our point of view. So using your consciousness now, looking back,
Mm, I think I had a lot actually.
go ahead, give us a first one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's see. Let's see. I think in first grade, first or second grade, I mean, I was the only Asian kid in my whole entire school
Okay,
at
what was
that
the
time.
demographic made up of?
Well, I grew up in Connecticut, so mostly white, I would say.
Okay, and was there affluence?
No, it's like a small suburbia, town. Farming land is not far from, our town as
Whereabouts in
well.
Connecticut?
It's like central, like outside of Hartford. So
Okay.
yeah, more central Connecticut. But it was a time when there was not a lot of diversity. This is when they used to bus the black kids from Hartford, which is, capital, into the suburbia, to mix it up. But everyone always called them the Hartford kids. But I think the existential crisis that, oh boy, it's like small things like, do you lie or tell the truth? Like when you don't have maybe the best language access.
So give an example of that.
Sure, like everyone has like a show and tell in first, second grade. You bring something in, you have to talk about it. For me, I didn't get a choice of what I got to show and tell. There was an article about my family in the newspaper because we were one of the first few families to come as refugees to Connecticut.
Refugees
So
from
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Yeah,
Okay. Just
refugees
because
from Vietnam.
also this is audio recording, so there are going to some people who won't be able to look at your lovely face.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, yes, being refugees from Vietnam. And I was instructed to walk around with this article and say something. I barely have any memory of what actually came out of my mouth, other than the fact that I felt like I had to somehow say, like, oh, this is my family in this picture. And the very front of the cover is, the boat people was an actual boat, people are crammed on there, which was part of the reality of
How
my
old were you?
probably like 2.5, 3
So
at the
you have
time.
memories on this journey?
No, thank God. Good job, brain. Way to wipe that part out. It's like, we know it's there. We don't need the details. We can just feel it. No, yeah. So I remember telling other students, like, yeah, this is my cousin. I didn't know these people. I have no idea who these are. I have no memory of that. But I knew enough at that age because I was only 5 when I started first grade. So I don't know why they started me so early, but yeah. So just even recognizing that I didn't have a choice in the information necessarily that I was being asked to present, as for show and tell.
So let me ask you this. So basically the show and tell came and they told you, I want you to tell us about what happened in the newspaper.
Yes. And
Okay,
then they
first of
marched me
all,
around different
why was
classes
this,
to
who
do
was
that.
highlighting it in the newspaper? Like, did a reporter come around or?
Yeah, there was an article in the local newspaper, and so it was like
But now
front.
let me just go down to this. But they did come around and ask permission from your family to do this.
The newspaper,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
oh yeah, no, like the article being written about my family and another Vietnamese families was separate. It's just, so once that came out, and then my whatever classroom teacher was like, okay, show and tell, and I have no, again, recollection of how this came about, but I remember being told, oh, that's great, it's your family, do let's go and talk to the different classrooms about whatever this article. I mean, I couldn't even read. Yeah.
And that's second grade, 7, 8?
Mm-mm. First grade, I was 5 years old.
So you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were taking this article around to other classrooms.
Yeah. They were having me go around. Little tiny, tiny little
Okay, so
refugee.
slightly a different time, not as woke as now. Let's just say that. And they just took this little token coin and they just showed how shiny it was to everyone in their school.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought,
I mean, I'm sure that still happens. So I wouldn't say that we're so as woke now. It's just a different lens, I think, that people the foundation starting point. But that right there, and it's more like confusion and like existential. It's like you ask yourself questions.
right.
What's going on? I feel confused. And for me, being a little kid and not being like anyone around me, you just go along. Like,
Right. Just
I'm trying to figure out what to do.
for clarification, you don't remember this. You're looking back on it now. Yes?
The walking around with the newspaper? No, I remember that.
Oh, okay, good.
I
I just
remember
wanted
that.
you didn't remember the trip, but you do remember this. Good.
Yes.
I wanted to double check.
Yeah.
That. So you remember, how did you feel in your body?
How did I feel in my body? I mean, probably very similar to how I feel nowadays, which is sort of autopilot. It's like, all right, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, so I just go along with whatever I'm being marched around to do. Um, and at the same time, I was really different from other kids, for obvious reasons, and because of how I look and ethnicity. But I also, was still learning English at that time, and was still predominantly, thinking in Vietnamese. Um, yeah, I mean, there are incidences. I mean, even in first grade, what was it first? No, it was second grade. So many things happen in primary school.
Well, this is
So
important
important
because,
to
they
notice.
say the first 5 years, right? The first 5 years is the imprint. So you came over on this journey. So there's going to be body memories of what happened, even if you can't remember, right off the top. The body remembers, the body holds information
Mhm.
To protect, basically. So if there is something that happened, the brain says, okay, remember this so it doesn't happen again, and it restores it into a cellular memory. Hence, people have PTSD, someone who comes back from
Sure.
war, the sprinkler sound, and they're off. This is because there's just this visceral response that has been trained for protection, because that was the sound of either fire or helicopter blades, whatever the particular trigger is. So although you have a memory now, the body has stored some story that occurred, and I mean that everyone has this, in order to help protect you, right? So the idea is the mind is always trying to protect the body, right? This is the idea, but it gets stuck in a loop, because now where you're living, you're not going to have the same traumatic experiences when you're on a boat coming over and it's crowded and if people are sick and all that goes with that, right? So when we ask, like, how does the body feel, or like being on autopilot, it's important, because those first 5 years of programming, and then the trauma as a child goes in deeper into the consciousness than when we're an adult, because we don't have the intellectual correction, or we're not basically told what the bigger picture is, right? However, we're actually closer to our pure soul's purpose, intuition, when we're younger, because it sort of just come out, which is why young kids are just so fabulous, because they just are who they are, right? Until they're conditioned to not be who they are. And so when things are imprinted earlier on, even if we have the intellectual correction through inner work we do as adults, it won't completely go away unless there's more modalities of what people are trying to do. It's still part of who we are, right? We're like, oh, sorry, I had that knee-jerk reaction. It's because of blah, blah, blah. But it's way less than it was before. So it is important that these things in childhood we talk about, because we want to go back to where that trauma was so huge for a child, right? Lack of control, right? That's why we make up all of these rules. And I don't mean make up like a story. We create these protective patterns because we don't want to have it repeated again, because the trauma happened as a child. But now when we're adults and we look back, we can say, oh, well, we don't need to be overreacting to this. But in some ways we do, because our body is still holding it, right? Our body is holding this fight or flight response, very similar to intellectually. One can know that going into an MRI chamber, you're going to be fine, just fine. But it starts up, and a huge majority of people just, their body's like, right? But the intellect knows they're fine. So why is this? There's fight or flight. There's something within the physiology of that individual, whether it's this lifetime, before, depending on what people believe, and it's having a natural response. So it is important to be talking about what happens as a child. So if you haven't, please like and subscribe the channel to support our lovely interviewees. But continue.
I think you bring up a really important point, and I think it's important to differentiate this because, I think of that memory not as a traumatic memory. It's more like, the starting point of the conversation is like, when did we have an existential question, which I think is centering in our agency, no matter how old we are, right? We
And when
still
you're
have
using the
some type
word
of,
agency, let's just define this for people.
sure, like the sense of having self-control in some
Okay.
way, and whether it's how I choose to see myself or react or respond to
Is
the
that
outside
similar
world.
to one's personal moral compass?
Well, I think moral compass that's about values, and I think like it's important for me to distinguish the difference between something of discomfort, a questioning brings up different maybe emotions versus things that are, as you were talking about, trauma, especially in early childhood, is often nonverbal. So we're talking that it's in your cells, right? And I'm not even going to get into historical trauma, or what does it mean to come from, a culture that has been dealing with war for centuries. So all of that is, I mean, I think about this stuff all the time anyways, but I think as a kid though, that memory of an existential, crisis, like that one being, okay, I don't know why I have to talk about my
Mm.
thing. No one else is having to go around. Like, look at the Johnsons. They, They did XYZ. So it just felt, I didn't understand, well, why did I feel like I was being selected? Not in a way where I felt powerless. It was more, I think I was more of a curious kid,
Mm,
um, in that aspect. But the second grade existential crisis was much more, I can tell you that, and the differentiation around trauma and something that you're like trying to solve an issue. Like it doesn't, you don't necessarily have that extreme, like boom, acute trauma with the fight, flight, or freeze type of response. But for me, I like had in second grade, I don't know why this happens. It's not like they didn't have money, like the red bouncy balls. And you had to sign up for it ahead of time at recess. And I waited, just, you're a little kid. Everything feels like it takes 5 years to get done. Like, oh my God, 30 minutes. Why don't you tell me when I'm dead? Very extreme sense of time.
mhm,
And I finally got my chance at the red ball. And then this older kid tried to take it from me, tried to bull me, and put me in an arm lock and or whatever, this bear lock, I guess. And I warned him, I knew enough to say, if you don't let me go, I'm going to bite you. So I end up in the principal's office as a result of that. But I remember when I, went back to my second grade class, and my teacher, when I was little, I really looked up to my teachers, I should say. They're the ones who I could relate to, and not my classmates. And I remember my second grade teacher saying to me, we don't do this here in America. We don't bite people. And I remember thinking I could not get out the words because, one, I was upset that I felt that there was an injustice that happened to me. I did what I was supposed to do. I signed up, I waited, I got my ball, and then this bully tries to bully me, takes
mm,
it, and then I defend myself as a much smaller child. And then I am getting reprimanded. And
mhm.
so it literally just felt like this transformation to, the Peanuts teacher, America, no biting.
Mhm.
And I just was just seething in my body like this tiny 2 foot little, kid, just like, and I knew at that time, it's like, the world is not fair. If you want justice, you can't trust adults to do it for you. You can't trust that the truth will be understood. You can't trust, that whatever someone is saying is necessarily true for you. That's a hard lesson at like 6. you know?
Yeah, but there was enough questioning, and that is very common, even in parenting as well, right? That it's simply reprimanding the end result rather than what was the lead up, right? All parties
Yeah.
have a responsibility within what occurred. And yes, definitely that phrase, we don't bite here in America, which, I know plenty of children that bit who are American.
Sounds like some memories. Like,
I
but
do. I do. I personally was never a biter.
oh,
And
I was a
my
monster.
brother, we grew up in England, he would bite. He was a biter. So it's more of the human condition. I do think it's very interesting. You mentioned as a child, why am I the one paraded around? And I think that's what's beautiful when we are younger. We are communicating our consciousness purely from the soul, as it were, because you knew you were different, but you didn't understand why. And ultimately, why, unless it's really explained that you could help people understand more and open their awareness with your permission, right? Which back then, even though it's not that long ago, I'm sure it would have been, no one should ask a 5 or 6 year old their permission. But really, yes, because, I have a niece who just turned 6, and, this is a, she doesn't take from anybody. She just 5, like,
Right.
and that would be something that she would want to be asked. You didn't ask me. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I mean, literally, that's what you would say at that age. And back then, people aren't. It's not even in the awareness to ask the child, like, do as we say, not as we do. What about your latest, you would say, existential crisis?
Latest. Well, I mean, I think there's the daily, what the hell am I doing with my life? What is even happening today, this moment? Um, and I think also because I had such a major recent transition, with work and making that decision to leave my job as a mental health counselor
Mm.
to do stand-up comedy, slightly different, just and I think checking in with myself, is this what I really honestly want to be doing?
What do you do to check in with yourself?
Oh, I mean, I'm in the process of like setting up some type of routine for myself. So I don't know if you're, oh, who's the author? James Clear, I think his name is, and he does his book is Atomic Habits. So it's talking about how do you build habits in a way that are identity based. So what does if I identify as a comedian, as a stand-up comic, what does a professional comedian do? And so reflecting on building, what are the things that I'm doing to better be in alignment about who I want to be, who I claim to be. So I think it's important, at least for me, and I tend to be in my head a lot, which is why I think stand-up comedy is helpful in some aspects, because it's rigid in some areas in terms of my development, as a newer comic. And then there's this part where you have to really be free and present to what you're saying and who you're talking to.
So it brings you from the head in towards the body, really, right? Brings you inward by expressing what's going on in the head. So there's an outlet for it.
Yeah, ideally it would be in your body, but I think it's even beyond that, because for for me though, my experience around doing stand up, when I feel like it's going well, is when I feel connected to the audience. Like
Mhm.
it feels like we're at this dinner table together, where I'm telling a good story, and it doesn't feel like da 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 da, da, in my head. Uh and so
So
there is something about
it's
being present
really a
in
sense of
community.
comedy coming from, does it's not a derivative of it, but commune, it's communing,
Hmm.
right? Communing
Absolutely.
with someone on a open soul, open heart level for that relatedness to be reflected back, because much of what we're conditioned is through the head, right? Do you fit in or not fit in society? What are you going to be with your life? And when it comes to identity, have you found you are an individual that tends to decompartmentalize, and the comedy has helped you fuse channels within those various areas?
I don't know if I decompartmentalize her. You mean about life in general and
Well,
in
yeah,
things?
well, identify as a mental health person here, comedy person here, somebody coming from Vietnam here. Is it all separate or is it all one?
I would say that it's sort of like a bento box that's got kind of shabby borders. Like, I don't know. Do we want more meat portion? Let's just take this divider out. Oh, okay. No, no, we're gonna have more pickles in this little, place. Like, what needs to mix? What needs to change? I think is the way I kind of think of my life. And there are things that I don't like when things merge. This transition time again, moving to LA, and then I got severely sick.
Mhm.
And the practice on top of like, what am I doing, is also just reminding myself you can still be kind to yourself, instead of my usual like, oh man, you're a waste of space. Like, what did you do today for 3 hours? Stare at the wall? Like, what do you really want this? And be more gentle with myself, whether it's through I have a practice of doing morning pages. One of the things that I well, actually was traumatized was definitely also in elementary school, with reading, because I was a slow reader. There was no ESL. So for most of my life, I have an aversion, and this story in my head that I'm not smart. I'm a terrible reader. I can't write. And that has, only started to resolve itself probably. And when I say resolve, I mean I feel in a better place with it. I'm much more aware of when that comes up for me. Um, to be able to read a book and be like, okay, I'm going to learn speed reading, and dedicate myself to being like, okay, I want to be a reader. Why? Because I am a curious person about the world. I love learning, and being okay about that transition of like, okay, I want to maintain like my therapy work, because I do have a lot of value and experience in that area. And I had such great opportunities to work with youth. And if anything, I think our youth are undersold. Um, so trying to find a way to advocate for myself, but also I feel very passionate about stuff that impacts marginalized communities, our youth. I mean, pick an issue. There's not like a shortage of things to worry about in our world. And for me, it's not worry. It's much more about where is it that we can create opportunities for light and hope
The
that
morning pages,
fuels
people who
change.
don't know, is a sort of a stream of consciousness upon awakening. There is a state of consciousness between waking state after sleeping. That's a sort of transitional state. And that's where the mind actually can roam more freely.
Mm-hmm.
And those people who are curious about the meditation that we teach, it is a letting go practice, not a concentration or a manifesting practice. It is designed to allow the mind to be in that space daily, twice a day in your regular routine, which allows the stress to come up and out, but allows the mind to access creativity quite quickly. And we have sort of squelched that process through our conditioning. We're
Mm-hmm.
allowing the mind to wander, which is why so many people have a hard time getting to sleep at night, dealing with anxiety, because the brain does not have a place to do that. If you want to find out more about the meditation, you can go down into the description and check that out. If you want to find out more about what this meditation is, we have this amazing book here called Vedic Meditation Stories. Hopefully it's not backwards, but it might be. This is the only publication in the world that has true stories from people who learned the technique, who aren't trying to tell you that they found $1 million and everything is hunky-dory. These are people who are mainly from underrepresented or marginalized groups who learned the practice and it changed their life. It is about a page per story. It has a little introduction. And if you have, I believe, Amazon Kindle Unlimited, it's completely free. So you can find that link down there below. With that, we'd like to thank our beautiful guests for being here and sharing their truth. And I hope that you will like it. You will share the story, subscribe. And I want to thank you all for joining us on this lovely episode of Cosmic Chats.